We're here doing a virtual seminar. We're following the CDC's recommendation to not have a gathering of more than 10 people, but the grade must go on, and the big achievement seminar with it as well. My name is Joseph Obiajulo. I am the teacher of the seminar, and let's jump into it. I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say that right now our world is superhero crazy. We love superheroes. We love to watch TV shows about them, watch movies about them. We love to talk about it with our friends. The biggest movies of the day happen to be superhero movies. I mean, if Clint Eastwood was acting right now, he wouldn't be the man with no name. He would be Iron Man, Superman, Batman, what have you. In fact, who could forget last year, Avengers Endgame, which became the most grossing movie of all time, period. It raised more than $2 billion. We love superheroes. We can't get enough of it. What if I told you you were a superhero of sorts? What if I told you that you're acquiring new powers? Your intellect is becoming sharper. You're becoming stronger, faster. You're acquiring the ability to generate life. You are living through your origin story right now. This is not the origin story of Peter Parker, the origin story of Bruce Wayne. This is the origin story of you. Now, like all heroes, you need a guide through your origin story. You need Uncle Ben to remind you that with great power comes great responsibility. You need Alfred Pennyworth to help you get through the difficult moments of your life, of this beginning of your adventure. And luckily for us, this is something that throughout the course of human history, people have been thinking about: how does a young man become a great man? And we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at how can we become men of character, men of maturity. And ultimately that means becoming men of virtue. So that's the topic for today: virtue-based character, becoming a man of character and maturity. Okay, so what do we think of when we think of men of character? Let's step past the superhero idea. We know that at the end of the day, superheroes don't really exist, but we do have people who do serve others. We do have men of character. In this picture here, we see Chris Evans, who plays Captain America in the Marvel's films. He's here with true men of character, United States troops who are overseas fighting for us right now. What makes these men of character? I think if we had to highlight one feature in particular, we would look at their service. These are men of character because they serve. They put others before themselves. They are mature. And a mature man puts others before himself. And that's ultimately what we should be aiming at. In the future, and already now, we are called to serve others. And as time goes on, we're going to have to serve more and more. And it's not a burden. It's actually a great joy to be able to be responsible for others, to have people depend on us. We want to be dependable men. We want to be mature men. So this brings us to the first main point. Character, which is what we're trying to build. This is where the origin story of our lives hopefully culminates, hopefully ends with us becoming men of character. Character enables you to take on responsibility, right? Character enables you to place others before yourself. So that's the name of the game. We want to be men of character. We want to be men of maturity. We want to be men who put others in front of ourselves. So how do we do this? We need a guide, right? What's going to be your guide? Who's going to be able to show us how this is done? We're going to be guided by the virtues. The virtues enable us to habitually act well. Not just sometimes, but always, or at least very, very often. We will be men of character only as much as we are men of virtue. It's a virtue that's going to be able to enable us to habitually act as men of character. So we're going to look at the 4 cardinal virtues, which stretches back all the way to the time of Plato and his Republic. These are the virtues that have been highlighted and outlined and talked about as what a man and what virtuous women need to live. So we're going to do this by looking at men who, in recent time, who have lived these virtues to an outstanding degree. First, James E. Burke. So in 1982, Johnson & Johnson had a big problem on their hands. It was discovered that, unfortunately, some deranged man or woman laced Tylenol capsules with potassium cyanide, which is a deadly poison. In fact, 7 people lost their lives after taking what they thought was just a routine Tylenol pill, which happened to have cyanide on it. Well, Mr. Burke, who was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson at that time, had a decision on his hands. What was he going to do? So the story goes that with the data and further analysis, Burke probably would have been able to figure out which bottles of Tylenol actually were contaminated and which ones didn't have too much of a threat of that. In fact, all these cases were in Chicago. But Burke decided that it wasn't worth the risk. Why save some money, help the bottom line, try to isolate where are these bottles, whereas meanwhile maybe someone else takes this and dies. And so instead what he did, he issued a nationwide recall of every single Tylenol bottle. And he went further than that. He also went around and had public press conferences and really made sure the American public knew what was going on. And he exhorted everyone not to take Tylenol, to return the bottles, and they were all granted a new bottle in return. He also then did cutting-edge research to figure out how can we make bottles of Tylenol to make sure we know if they've been tampered with or not, and that's how we get your typical bottle of Tylenol or another medicine that's kind of like child locked. And now this costs literally hundreds of millions of dollars. If you adjust for inflation, in today's standards, it costs them about $250 million. But he said, what's that compared to just one life? And that's why I wanted to pick James E. Burke, because I think he highlights very well this virtue of justice. Justice is giving every man what is his due. And James E. Burke realized that every single one of his customers, everyone who bought a bottle of Tylenol, had as his due the assurance that they were not going to die because of potassium cyanide poisoning. This is what was simply owed to them. And it didn't matter how much it cost, it didn't matter how much it was going to hurt the bottom line. He had to give each man what was his due. And you can see how justice is a very important virtue as far as the well-orderedness of society. In fact, you could say it's the most important virtue to ensure society is ordered well. The other virtues, which we'll talk about right after this, kind of look more at man and his own actions. This one looks at how man relates to other men. And so if we give other people what is their due and we don't take things which are their due, society is going to be a just society, and society is going to be clicking, it's going to be rolling, it's going to be going the way it should go. If not, we have some problems. And people typically go wrong in justice when they don't give men what is their due, or they refrain from giving man, or they steal from man what is their due. So you can think of not giving someone the respect they're due, not giving someone the money they're due, or stealing the money that's due theirs, stealing the property that is theirs, not giving someone the attention that is their due. I think for us, that's one that we have to be very mindful of. Our family, our parents, our siblings, they are due certain attention from us. We owe it to them to put down the phone and listen to mom, listen to dad, listen to our little sibling as they tell us about their day. We owe them our respect and their attention. So we can ask ourselves, how am I living this virtue of justice in my dealings with my family? Before we move on, I want to jump back to James E. Burke, and I want to show what happened with all these actions. Before the whole cyanide poisoning, Johnson & Johnson had 37% of the market as far as painkillers go. During this whole crisis, it dropped down 7%. But because of James E. Burke's exemplary actions and making sure everyone knew what was going on, the company rebounded. People respected Johnson & Johnson so much more, they actually ended up with 40% of the market share of painkillers. So, hey, it pays to act justly. Moving on, here we have James Stockdale. James Stockdale was a fighter pilot, and he was flying with the best of them. He was shot down over Vietnam pretty quickly. He was taken as a POW, a prisoner of war. Being a POW in Vietnam was a very, very tough thing. He was a prisoner of war for about 7 years. He underwent terrible tortures. He was beaten almost daily. It was brutal. It was a brutal situation. Now, James, though, did not give up. So I want to read this quote from this book called Good to Great. It's written by this journalist, James Collins, who actually interviewed James Stockdale. just now realizing we have a lot of Jameses this session. James E. Burke, James Stockdale, James. Anyway, so James Collins is interviewing James Stockdale, and he asks him about his time being a POW in Vietnam. And he really want to ask them, how did he think of it when he was going through it? How did he manage to cope with the stressful situation? I want to read the direct quote from Stockdale. Stockdale says, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which, in retrospect, I would not trade." So we can see James did not give up. He did not give in. He did not back down. In fact, he said, this is going to be the defining moment of my life. Think about that the next time you have a difficult day. But Collins also had another question for him. He asked, how about the guys who didn't make it through? How about the guys who did back down and who did give up and who did give in? And Stockdale says this, "Oh, that's easy. It was the optimists who didn't make it out. Oh, they were the ones who said we're going to be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they would say, we're going to be out by Easter. Easter would come and Easter would go. Then they would say, we're going to be out by Thanksgiving. And then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart." Stockdale then added this. "This is a very important lesson," he said. "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be." Collins called this approach of Stockdale, which was, on the one hand, not giving up faith that he would prevail over this terrible situation, but at the same time, not giving into illusions that the situation wasn't as bad as it really was. Collins called this approach of Stockdale the Stockdale paradox. I think instead we could call it an example of the virtue of fortitude. Fortitude is traditionally thought of as the virtue that enables man to do what he knows is right, even when it's difficult. And for Stockdale's case, this was not giving in. And in a particular sense, this was not giving up American secrets during the Vietnam War, in which he was tortured and beat to reveal. So fortitude is the virtue that enables us to do what we know is right, even though we know that it is hard, and to not pretend that it is not hard, and also not to pretend that what we're doing is not good. We have to continue, even though it's tough. It's characterized by this idea that we are willing to fall in battle. We're willing to fight for what's right, even if that means the ultimate sacrifice. Now, at the same time, the virtue of fortitude is most shown in persevering, not in attacking. So we attack, of course, we try to do the right thing, we have to do the right thing, but sometimes we're going to have these moments in life in which there's no more attacking that can be done. Think of James Stockdale. He is in a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. He cannot fight anymore, but he can persevere. And this is the deeper battle, and this is the battle that fortitude enables us really to fight, that I'm going to give it my all, and even when I can't give anything else, I'm not going to give up. That's fortitude. Now, people go wrong in fortitude many different ways, but ultimately it's when they stop doing what they know is good, what they know is right, when they stop persevering because of challenges, because of hardships. These are the optimists who say it's going to be over soon and it's not over soon, and they get discouraged and they stop. These are also the cowards who say, what's the point in fighting? It's too hard. We can't afford to be either. We have to give it our all, even though giving it our all is difficult. Next, this fellow you see here is Yiteng Zhang. Yiteng Zhang is a mathematician. He, in 2014, won the MacArthur Grant, Fellowship Grant, which is given for geniuses, basically. But Zhang's story was not the traditional approach of most mathematicians. So as a young man, he's interested in math. He wants to study it. It's kind of thwarted because of the Chinese Communist Revolution. That comes, that goes. He's able to study at Peking University. He studies math, does very well. He's able to come to the United States, study at Purdue University. That's when things start to go awry for him. He doesn't really get along all that well with his professor. The story goes that he pointed out some mistakes of his advisor. His advisor wasn't happy about this, and there was friction, He leaves without publishing a paper. He leaves on bad terms with his advisor, and he leaves basically not being able to find a job in math. That's pretty tough. It gets tougher. He works several odd jobs. He works in a motel in Kentucky. He works as an accountant. He works as a food deliverer in New York City. He works at a subway stop selling sandwiches in New York City as well. So he's just working these odd jobs. But he continues to do math on the side. I wanted to pick him to highlight the virtue of temperance because it would have been very easy for Yiting to give in to frustration, give in to anger, give in to self-victimization, and to give up math, to seek some other kind of more comfortable life. He probably could have lived comfortably just giving up math. But he was very temperate, and he decided to not give in to his anger, to frustration, which, if anyone has a reason to feel frustrated, is probably him. He doesn't give in to the allure of an easy, comfortable life. Instead, he continues to work on his math on the side, which was a true sacrifice. They call it for true sacrifice. What is this virtue of temperance? This virtue of temperance is what enables man to be properly internally well ordered, right? To be able to order your emotions, order your desires, order all of that towards proper goals. And for him, he ordered his life, the interior of his life, towards the pursuit of something beautiful, the beauty of math. And so he was a very temperate man as far as that goes. What does being temperate allow us to do? It allows us to selflessly self-preserve our life, which drastically differs from the selfish self-preservation. A selfish self-preservation seeks one's own self. If you're putting yourself in front of others, you are trying to make sure that you protect your time, protect your comfort, to protect your opinion. You're trying to preserve yourself, but it's self-defeating. Because at the end of the day, man is meant to put others in front of himself. Man is meant to live for others. And so if you're trying to put yourself in front of others to preserve yourself, you're actually acting against yourself. You're actually destroying yourself in your attempt to selfishly self-preserve. Instead, in order to truly and selflessly self-preserve, we have to do it in a way in which it's well-ordered, where we put others and great ideals in front of our own interior, wants and wishes, which are very fleeting. One day you want this, one day you want that. That's life. Yiting did that. Yiting did that because he had this beautiful ideal of seeking beauty in math. And he ordered his emotions, his interior state, to pursue that goal. He was temperate. You can go wrong in temperance in many, many different ways. It all comes down to this idea of selfishly seeking yourself. So that could be putting feelings at the center of how you live. That could be putting comfort at the center of how you live. That could be putting just any kind of pleasure at the center of how you live. All this is very self-defeating because it's a selfish self-preservation. It's okay to preserve yourself, but we got to do it for others and for other things. People do need us, so you have to preserve ourselves, but we have to do it for others and for ideals, not for ourselves. Brings me to the second main point. In order to be men of character, we have to be men who live these three virtues I just outlined. We have to be just men, we have to be brave men, and we have to be temperate men. We have to be men who are brave, just, and who are self-controlled. We need that in order to be men of character. Okay, I want to move on. We're going to introduce the last virtue, but before we do, I just want to kind of flush it out a little bit more. So, hang with me. Okay, we look here, we see a bullseye, and we see kind of darts or shots that were fired at, what have you. Okay, so on the left, we can see the shots. The marks are all over the place. They're not grouped anywhere, and they're definitely not in the center. Now, on the right, we have these marks, which are kind of all grouped together, but they're not in the center. We can see on the left, we're missing both precision and accuracy. We're not together, the shots are all over the place, and they're definitely not in the center. On the right, we have precision. We were able to fire basically at the same spot, but it was the wrong spot. We don't have accuracy. The point being is both of these are off of the mark. The left is worse, but the right is still pretty bad. You're not anywhere near the center. We in life want to aim and strike both precisely and accurately. And prudence is going to be the virtue that enables us to hit the center. You can think of it as the virtue of accuracy. You can kind of think of these other three virtues as what will enable us to be precise, to be able to kind of hit where we're trying to hit. But we have to know where we're trying to hit. We have to be accurately measured. We have to hit the center. Here we're looking at President, and at this time, General Eisenhower. Eisenhower was a big player in American history in the 40s and 50s. He was the head of the European theater of World War II. So big role, big responsibility. Eisenhower, I think, is a great modern example of a man who lived prudence. He was a man of balance. He was a man who realized that we can't go too far to the left, too far to the right, too far up, too far down, too far back, too far forward. We need to be in the center. We need to be accurate. Eisenhower gave a very famous farewell speech. It kind of ranks up there with JFK's inaugural address and other great speeches of American rhetoric tradition. In this speech, Eisenhower outlines very well, I would say, this virtue of prudence as far as in political activity. I want to read from this. It was easy, Eisenhower warned, to fall prey to, quote, the recurring temptation to feel that some spectacular and costly action could become the miraculous solution to all current difficulties. He reminds us that each proposal must be weighed in the light of a broader consideration, the need to maintain balance in and among national programs. In kind of somewhat of a fever pitch moment, he says, good judgment seeks balance and progress. Lack of it eventually finds imbalance and frustration. And prudence is often called good judgment, because that's basically what it is. Eisenhower exercised a lot of good judgment, I would say, in his ability to keep the Cold War cold. So he's coming right after Truman's coming right after the end of World War II, the beginning of the Cold War. There's a lot of jostling going on with the USSR. People are afraid of war. There's the nuclear proliferation. Things are heating up. Things are ramping up. And what's amazing about Eisenhower is that he is able to kind of play it cool, and he's able to keep Americans in the Army out of of a large engagement head on with the USSR. He's masterful at doing that. Really, he is, as far as his military maneuvering goes, he really exercised a lot of prudence, a lot of balance, a lot of good judgment. And so let's look a little bit more at this virtue of prudence. Prudence is the most important moral virtue. So the other virtues, they help us to live well. We need to be brave, we need to be just, we need to be temperate. But prudence is actually one in which we use our intellect to figure out, what should I do? And if we don't really do what we're supposed to do, we can't possibly be truly brave or truly just or truly temperate, because all of those enable us to do good things. Remember fortitude. Fortitude, we said, is what enables us to do what we know is right, even though it's tough. But if we don't know what is right, we can't do it, even if it's tough. There's no merit in doing something that's tough, but that's bad. So prudence is actually what is able to give form to all of the other virtues, because it helps us to actually order towards good things. In order to be prudent, we need two things. We need to first be able to look around and realize the truth of reality, to be able to say, this is how things are, this is how things are not. We need to know what reality is in order to do prudent actions. Let me give you an example. What if I thought that there was not an outbreak of COVID right now? There's no way I'm going to be able to act prudently. If I'm not aware of this COVID outbreak, I'm just going to think that it's totally fine to go anywhere and talk to anyone and what have you, right? So I need to know that, hey, there's an outbreak right now of this COVID-19, not to be fearful, but to be precautious in order to act prudently. Okay, second half of prudence, once we recognize what reality is, we actually have to be able to recognize the path towards, in the context of the real world, getting what is good, doing what is good. So we need to allow reality, the recognition of reality, to actually shape our actions. And that's kind of the second part of prudence, letting reality shape our actions. People go wrong in prudence basically on these two fronts. Either they don't recognize, they don't, for whatever reason, they don't want to, or out of ignorance, recognize the reality of the world. And that basically, without that sine qua non, you just cannot be prudent if you don't know what the world is actually like. So another way you can go wrong is once you know reality, is not thinking clearly, not deliberating with enough time, enough consideration. But then also, once you've deliberated and realized what needs to be done, you can also be imprudent by delaying that action. So you realize, oh, I have to do my homework because it's due tomorrow. It's imprudent to procrastinate. So do your homework. Great, so this brings me to main point number 3. Before we can act and strike with justice and with prudence and with temperance, we have to know where to aim. And it's going to be the virtue of prudence that lets us know where to aim. Good, so remember we said we want maturity, we want character based on virtue. And so just to summarize, we look at these 4 virtues. Here we actually have a very beautiful image of these 4 virtues. This was painted, I think, in the 1500s. One of these was painted by a very famous painter, Botticelli. The other 4 were painted by a less famous painter. I can't remember his name, sorry. Actually, but I think it'd be a little cool experiment. Do you think you can like name which one of these paintings correspond to which of these virtues? Take a minute, try to think about it. I'll let you know in a second. Okay, cool. So we have the one on the left that is prudence. You can see in the mirror that this woman is looking in the mirror and she sees herself. And this is prudence because prudence requires us to look outside of ourselves, to look at reality and see how things actually are. We actually have to know what things actually look like. We actually have to know what things actually are, ourselves included. We got to look in the mirror. The one next to it is fortitude. You can see the woman here is dressed kind of as a soldier. She has armor on, and once again, this readiness to fall in battle. Next to that, we have temperance. We can see the lady is pouring a glass of some sweet liqueur. So she's pouring this drink very temperately, not too much. Also, not too little. Sometimes life calls for celebration. And finally, to the right, we have justice. We can see this woman, she's kind of like ruling a little bit, and she's ruling justly. That's the point. So here, the 4 virtues are the basis of all mature human action. That's the main point here. We're going to finish up this lesson by just looking at a dichotomy of ways that we can act, either acting like an immature child or acting like a mature adult. Ultimately, a mature adult is going to be living the virtues, and the immature child is not going to be. Okay, so let's first look here. The immature child is weak and self-centered. He kind of asks himself, what can others do for me? On the other hand, the mature adult is strong and other-centered. He asks himself, what can I do for others? What can I do for you? And really, I think in order to do this, this requires the virtue of prudence. So the first step of prudence, we recognize reality and we say, hey, I'm not the center of the world. Hey, there are 700 billion people on this earth. Maybe I should act to help them and help my family and help my friends. Maybe I shouldn't just act for myself. And so it's prudence that's able to actually stop, look around, and say, I'm not the center of the world. Next, so the immature child he kind of exercises very little respect. And this is also manifested through a lack of manners towards other people. The mature adult, on the other hand, is very respectful, and he exercises manners, and he holds doors open for women. He gives a firm handshake. He excuses himself from the table. He calls his friends and family to check in on them. He respects people. He calls people sir and madam. He lives proper etiquette at the table. He asks other people how they're doing during conversations. He's a man of respect. And I think here the virtue that this man would live well and that the immature child does not is the virtue of justice. Why? Because the mature man gives others what is their due. Because all men deserve respect. Because they are creatures of God. Which is an action, it's a decree that goes beyond all human comment. Okay, another example here. The immature child wants to be liked. The mature adult wants to be respected. And I think a virtue that is exercised here, I mean, many of the virtues are exercised here, but one that comes to the fore is fortitude. Why? Because fortitude is what enables us to do the good even when it's tough. Now, this sometimes means that we're going to have to do things that are unpopular, but which are the right thing to do. And the man who wants to be respected is totally comfortable doing this. Because this is, hey, look, even if people are not going to like me, I know this is the respectable thing to do. I know this is the right thing to do. So I'd rather be respected than liked. And the immature child is going to say, oh man, it's the right thing to do, but what are my friends going to think? They're not going to like me. So let me just close my eyes and do this thing that I know is wrong so I can be liked. That is the opposite of fortitude. Last one. The immature child is amusement oriented. He acts to be amused. He seeks his own self-amusement. This is kind of the idea of selfish self-preservation. The mature man, on the other hand, is achievement-oriented. He doesn't act to just amuse himself. He acts to achieve goals. He acts towards ends. He acts to do things. He gets things done. He does what he has to do. He says no factor, and then he gets it done. He powers through. He hammers on the project. He knocks it out of the park. He doesn't give in. He just keeps on going through the fire, through the flame. He makes sure it gets done. Got it, good, like it, love it, gotta have it, gotta do it now. It should have been done yesterday. He gets it done. I think I'm at the point. Okay, great. So exercise here. In your binder, you're gonna find in the March section of your binder, a worksheet called The Scale of Maturity. And I pulled some of these, the dichotomy between immature and mature adult from that worksheet. I want you, as an exercise, to go through the entirety of that worksheet. I want you to circle or highlight which side you fall on. And with complete honesty, and it's going to require humility at some point, to say, hey, I'm actually on the immature child side for this one item, or for these items. So I want you to do that. It's going to be good for you. Trust me, if you do it, you're not going to regret it. Now, after you do that, if you do fall into the immature child section for some of these worksheets, I want you to sit down and think about, how can I move myself to the mature adult side? You're going to have to actually plot an approach towards that. So maybe you're amusement oriented right now, which is a lot of society. So you're going to have to say, how can I become achievement oriented? You're going to have to think about, what achievements should I try to do? I'm going to have to start small, build up. All this is going to require prudence. It's going to require prudence, this intellectual and moral virtue that helps you to actually think about it using your brain. Think about, what do I need to do, and get it done. Good. So do that exercise. You can do it right now. You can pause and get it done, or we're basically done. We have another 2 minutes, and you can do it afterwards. So get that done. Now, just a review of the main points. There were 3 of them. So let's go back to it really quick. First, character enables you to take on responsibility, placing yourselves before others. We want to be men of character. We kind of highlighted the fact that character is predominantly manifested in this ability to put yourself behind others, put others before yourself. Second main point, in order to be a man of character, you need to be both just, brave, and self-controlled. This life is going to call for some difficult, noble actions on your part. In order to do that, you're going to need to be brave, just, and self-controlled. You need all 3. All 3 are going to enable you to strike with precision, but you're going to need to strike with accuracy as well. And so, in order to strike with true justice, fortitude, and temperance, you need to know where to aim. You need to be prudent. So prudence is going to be that last, but really the first and most important of the moral virtues. It's this intellectual virtue that enables you to see what needs to be done and to get it done. And now we're done. Thanks for tuning in for the first virtual grade session. Stay tuned. I'm not sure. We might have to do this for longer. We're definitely monitoring the situation. We're monitoring what the New York Department of Health and the CDC is recommending. We're following the directives. We're trying to do whatever needs to be done. We're trying to be prudent, trying to be brave, trying to be just, trying to be temperate as we go through this uncharted situation. So you stay safe, you take the precautions, follow proper hygiene, try not to go to public venues if you don't need to, act prudently. That's most important. We might need to do this again in April. We'll see. Hopefully not, but we'll see. We'll follow whatever the directives of the governmental agencies are. In the meantime, and I cannot stress this enough, use this time well. Use this time well. You probably have anywhere from 3 to 7 new hours in your day, just every day. So if it's the last 4 weeks, I don't want you to look back and say, where did those 50 hours go? Right? I want you to say, I used those 50 hours well. Use it with your family. Use it with your family. We're called to be good family men. Use it to catch up with your friends over the phone and FaceTime and video calls and Zoom. Use it to get work done. Get your schoolwork done. It's very easy right now to not work hard, to kind of do it half-heartedly, and to kind of blow through it. Don't do that. If you're used to doing 2 hours of homework, I would say try to find some way of doing 2 hours of homework. Maybe it's studying deeper. Maybe it's getting a jump start on SATs or PSATs. Maybe it's reading. Use this time to sharpen your intellect. Also get a good workspace, work well. Finally, be a good citizen. Read the news. Don't spread this thing. Do what you need to do to stay safe and keep your family safe and your grandparents safe. That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you when I see you. Take care.